jump into the compliance. You might have already seen the risk matrix about the medium, low, and high risk stuff for compliance. Okay, now this one is all about CFC rules. I mentioned it a lot. I promised that I would make a video on it. I'm focusing in Europe, as obviously most of my client base is based in Europe. We now have, I think, 85 clients now totally at Forward Point Solutions. And that is over a 1.5 year period. So really, really nice growth, and it's proven to be a great business, very popular. And the reason is we do provide a lot of value, especially in being very transparent. Obviously, we know solutions, we know ways around most things, but CFC rules you have to be very compliant with. Okay, so an ownership, there's 5 different versions of CFC rules. Firstly, so an ownership threshold determines whether the entity is considered as a controlled foreign company. That equals CFC, controlled foreign company. Most Western countries consider a foreign subsidiary a CFC if one or more related domestic corporations owns at least 50% of a subsidiary. 29 OECD countries use this as their standard. So if you own less than 50%, it is okay. If a subsidiary is considered a CFC, there is another test to determine whether the subsidiary's income should be taxed domestically. So let's say you own a company in the Cayman Islands at 0% corporation tax. It triggers CFC rules. You now have to pay your local corporation tax on that. In the UK, that would then be 25% or 19%, depending on how much income is going through. Most Western countries view a subsidiary as taxable if a foreign jurisdiction's tax rate is below a certain threshold and a certain of the share of income is passive. Passive income includes earnings that don't stem from the actual business activity, like interest, dividends, rental income, or royalty income. Once it has been determined that the subsidiary is a CFC and is to be taxed domestically, the countries decide what income earned by the CFC will be subject to tax. These rules also vary significantly, and you can apply for a passive share or active or both. So we can roughly differentiate between 5 different levels of CFC rules. Number 1, strict rules against active income, strict rules against passive income, soft rules against passive income, general tax avoidance rules, or no CFC rules. So obviously Switzerland, as we can see on the map here, has limited measures. It's very soft in its regulation. When we go out of Europe, we can look at Serbia, we can look at Montenegro with no CFC rules. So countries with strict CFC rules against active enterprises. Egypt, domestic management more than 70% of passive income. Belgium, Belgian companies hold a direct or indirect participation of more than 50% of the capital voting rights or profit of a foreign entity, plus the foreign entity is taxed less than half under the CIT, half of the CIT under the Belgian rules. Brazil, crediting foreign tax up to 34%. China, below 12.5 corporation tax. Croatia, currently I'm not too sure. I need to double check. Obviously, since I've joined the EU, their regulation has been all over the place. They've been increasing it, but we can expect about 12.5% corporation tax as for trigger. So if you hear me ever mention this CFC trigger, that is usually the trigger which I'm on about. Estonia, 12%. France, 50% below the French rate. Germany, domestic management below 25% corporation tax, passive income. Greece, domestic management below 13% corporation tax. UK, domestic management. Now what this means, that's why I mention economic substance a lot, is because if you have economic substance, then it doesn't really matter. That's why the UK is a fantastic place to be, actually, as a businessman. Many people think it's a high tax jurisdiction, but if you have operations in the Cayman Islands and you have economic substance there, which we can help you create at Forward Point Solutions, we have the means to set up the office there for you to link you with those necessary parties for you to create that economic substance. Then obviously you can go ahead and do this. You can see some of these down below. So I'm not going to read all of these out. Countries with strict CFC rules against passive enterprises. You can see some of these as well. Canada, passive income, ownership of more than 10% of outstanding shares, or ownership of more than 50% of voting shares. Okay. So if you own 50%, or less of a company, then obviously that's how it would go by. Countries with soft CFC rules against enterprises. These are much more softer ones. Countries without CFC rules, but some limitations. So Austria requires significant assets for active companies. Latvia, 15% withholding tax on transactions with low tax countries. Malta, more than 50% passive income, less than 15% taxes. The Netherlands, 15% withholding tax on services in countries with less than 12.5% or blacklisted. Okay, so this 12.5% trigger is coming in again, which we see with a lot of countries. Countries without any CFC rules: Switzerland, Ireland, Czech Republic, Slovakia, Chile, and Luxembourg. So obviously there are some CFC rules that have been brought into play, but they are very softly. So if you search on Google, Switzerland would do, but you have to go into the intricacies to find out why. Everyone has said no. There are ways around that very easily, if that kind of makes sense. Again, if you do need help, contact us at www.forwardpointsolutions.com. Non-cooperating or blacklisted countries. So basically they're tax havens or on the blacklist, okay? So this can be a 0% corporation tax rate, which is a safe haven. Treaties for the exchange of tax information can lead to the countries being taken off the list again. Because of that, there can be zero tax in countries that are not blacklisted. After recent data leaks with like Panama, Paradise Papers, that's what I'm on about. Maybe I make some videos on these actually. But you can see some cool information that came up there, and this is what happens, you know. Up until very recently, there was no agreed upon blacklist in the EU, but in October 2022, I believe, that changed. And yeah, a few exemptions. EU freedom of establishment. As a consequence of the scandals around offshore companies and tax havens in recent years, we might see a move from offshore to onshore, even within the EU. So there are several models for strategies to be very good on tax and reduce it to a minimal rate, all completely legal and official. We can help you with these. The reason for this is EU freedom of establishment allows citizens of EU countries to operate companies in other member states without restrictions. In theory, EU law is supposed to override any national regulations that are aiming to prevent tax optimization. Exit taxes or CFC legislation are not supposed to apply. That's within the EU. There are still countries that do not follow the EU legislation and continue to view other member states like Malta, Cyprus, Ireland, Estonia, or Bulgaria as low-tax countries where CFC rules fully apply in cases where there is no local economic substance. So again, this is a key word, economic substance. I'll make another video on this and how we can help you generate that, especially in most tax havens, and especially if you're like a UK resident, for example. It's a very beneficial solution and setup that you can actually look at. Okay. So, exception, CFC rules are primarily trying to get the target use of empty shell companies. This changes when the company can show credible economic activity in the country of incorporation, and this is called economic substance. This means renting an office, having employees or other company assets. Given enough substance, those types of companies can be operated even from countries with strict CFC rules, which is what I am on about. I'll go into a video explaining that in the future. So here are some case studies. Germany is one of the countries with the most restrictive CFC rules. The controlled foreign company has to show a significant amount of substance. A single employee in a small office is not sufficient. Furthermore, the managing director has to spend a certain amount of time in that country, abroad, or must not have more than 50% ownership. So it's kind of cool. If you're a business partner, you can have 45% shares, 2-3 employees over there, and again, you're still saving more, and you get the benefit of an office and an employee. On your website, you can list it, and again, we can do those utility bills there. You can have a phone bill there. You can have a phone line there. Very, very cheap stuff. So very easy to actually do this. Residents of Austria, XYZ. It's all pretty much self-explanatory. I don't know if that kind of makes sense, but I just thought I would introduce the CFC rules. You can go ahead and search on Google. Looks a little bit of a scary topic, but we can really help you essentially get around these rules legally. There's certain protocols for certain checkboxes that you have to tick, but it's best to obviously consult with an expert, such as an attorney or a legal advisor on those. But again, we can guide you in that direction and connect you with the right parties that you need to speak to be well educated, informed, and make the best choices moving forward for yourself and your business. So please get in touch if you do have any questions. I know it wasn't really a well-structured video, but it's quite a boring one, to be honest. But we have to learn about this. You have to be aware about this. Because if you are operating in an offshore jurisdiction and your personal tax residency is in the UK, obviously that is a problem, and we need to fix that problem.